Excuse me, I'd like to remind participants that this call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. And you may begin, sir.
Farmland Protection Policy Act, FPPA. LE part of LISA. Land Evaluation, LE, LISA, Land Evaluation Site Assessment. We will be describing how to complete certain parts of Form AD 1006, which is a Farmland Conversion Impact Rating, which normally are used for site or nonlinear or non-corridor type projects. During the talk, I'll probably refer to it as non-corridor. That way you will not be confused with a corridor, which is the form NRCS CPA 106 is a corridor. A corridor is usually something that's linear, like a road or something that we're evaluating. And it's entitled Farmland Conversion Impact Rating for corridor type projects. So let's look at the Form 1006, which is a non-corridor. And if you look at Part 2, Part 4, and Part 5, you will see it indicates that the NRCS will complete these parts. I might stop just a moment and make a comment that the actual system that you will be using, which is a land evaluation system, may differ from what you're looking at here. That is because of the fact that it is made up by individuals who's doing it for a jurisdiction. They have guidelines to follow, but those guidelines can deviate. And the important thing is to determine or find out whether the state conservationist in that state has approved that LE system for use to complete 1006s and 106s, and it's in the field office technical guide. If it's there, then it's the one to be used for completing the corridor and non-corridor forms. But before we do this, usually another agency or department, federal agency or department, needs to complete Part 1. And so they will complete Part 1 as instructions tell them to complete it. Then they will submit this to one of our offices, whichever one that, in any case, they should send it. And then we will do Part 2. And the first question in Part 2 is, does this site contain prime, unique, statewide, or local important farmland? Yes or no? Well, if this is required, then some type of a map or some form of a map will need to accompany this request with Part 1 completed by the other federal agency. So these are suggestions on the way that this information could be furnished. So if we go to the next slide, which would be a map using the web-saw survey. I'll talk a little bit about the web-saw survey, and it's very well suited for the non-corridor or site projects. And this is a 100.1 acre tract that would determine the soils and also the location of this project. This computer program that generates this is called the Web Soil Survey, and it's on the computer. All you have to do is go in there and click on it, and then you can have a way of locating this particular site you're interested in, and then you can generate this map to locate the site so that we can decide whether or not it has important farmland. Now, if you use the web soil survey, if you go to the next slide, it has a tool that will actually generate a map indicating if there's any important farmland. And so if you go on down to the next, just below there, you're going to see, okay, let's stop here just a moment, I guess. Here's the legend. So if you look at the legend, you can decide whether or not you can have concern about having important farmland. But the best tool to use is the next part of this. Move it down. And I wish it was a little easier to read, but, oh, here we go. It actually tells you the rating. It tells you the map symbol, it tells you the name, and so then you don't have to worry. If any of that column for rating has one of the 4 important farmland, prime, unique, statewide, or local, then you must check that yes, because it does contain important farmland. And you notice this tract here contains both prime and farmland of statewide importance. Now, the nice thing about using this tool is Part 3, which also has to be done by the federal agency that's submitting this to NRCS, is they have to give the acreage. And if you look over there, the second column from the right, it has acres. Now, we suggest you round those to whole numbers, but that's up to you. But you notice this particular one has 100.1 acres. Well, you want to be sure that you adjust that acreage to be whatever the project is, because unless you have a better hand to draw that line to outline the area, you're going to be a little shaky, and you're going to find out that the acres that are supposed to be there and this acre may differ, but you can make that adjustment. So you see that this situation that then we will have to complete the rest of Part 2, 4, and 5. So let me go to the next slide and talk a little bit about this one. Now, this one is not required for FPPA. I just take a little commercial time here, if you would. I want you to understand that this web soil survey has many, many different types of information. And I just picked another one that might be of interest to people working with land. And this is the one we call hydric soils by map unit. And again, let me emphasize, this is not involved in FPPA, but I wanted to have a commercial here for web soil survey that I find out many people don't know exists. And once they find out about it, it's a real nice tool because it can be used for both getting information for building a home or a septic tank installation. This has many uses. So, end the commercial, we're going back now and talk about FPPA and Form 1006 and 106. Okay, now, if you notice here, we have Part 1 completed. The other federal agency completed this. And then we got Part 2 and to fill out our agency. And you include that map you looked at earlier. And we do have important farmland, so we checked yes. And then we had to fill out the rest of this form. And the next question is acres irrigated. Well, in this particular jurisdiction, the soils get sufficient rainfall that they don't need to be irrigated, so none of the acreage in this jurisdiction is irrigated. The next question is average farm size. And by the way, I'm sorry, let me go back and talk about acres irrigated. Let's assume that there was acres irrigated. Normally, this would be in the field office tech guide, or if you need to find it, it should be in the NAS information, National Agriculture Statistical Service. They're a part of USDA, and they maintain this type of information. Okay, average farm size can be gotten the same place, either from the field office technical guide or from the NAS data. Okay. If you listen to the earlier module on developing land evaluation or relative values, you know that you have to specify a crop, whatever crop you use to develop your land evaluation. And in this case, it's corn. You also, if you have taken the other course, you see that there's a table, or worksheet, worksheet 2, that summarizes all the information that was developed in the process of making the LE for this jurisdiction. And we will go through this, and then I'll show those worksheets to you. But now there's one of the worksheets that you can get that acreage off of it. The next question says farmable land. Well, farmable land basically means anything that will produce a yield. And so in this particular jurisdiction, there was 300,000 acres, or 60% of that jurisdiction is what's defined officially as farmable land. The next column is amount of farmland as defined by FPPA. And that's the same thing as in the first question. FPPA means land that is prime, unique, statewide, or local. And in this information that we get off the LE information we developed was 200,000 acres, or 40% of that jurisdiction. Now, the next question is name of land evaluation system used. Well, normally it's the jurisdiction name or the county name typically, and this, so we put in here Zeta County LE system. Name of state or local site assessment system, that is not available in this county, so they will use the federal one, but again, there's a module that goes into great detail of how you do that, so all I say to you is you want to visit that module and see what it says. Now, one of the important things that I forgot to do, and is done many times, is the fact if you go back up to Part 2, the very first thing it says is date request received by, and in this case it's NRCS, and the date we received it was May 9th, 2011. That is the day it comes into your office. It's not the day you decide to open the envelope or to click on the computer to bring it up. Yes. So you got to go by the date that you actually received it, whether you looked at it or not. And then we also need to know the person completing the form. And later during this discussion, I'll tell you why this date is so important. It's a very critical date, and we need to be sure that we understand why it's critical. Okay, and the last item in Part 2 is the date the land evaluation returned by NRCS. And you see we got it the 9th, and we sent it back the 11th, which means that it's within the range of period of time that we have to complete this form. Okay, you remember I told you about Part 3, that's responsibility of the federal agency. And I want to stress here that this usually is a mutual discussion between the federal agency wanting this done and the NRCS person doing it, because it differs on the tools that this person has. Now, like I said, everybody has access to the web saw survey. except many times web saw survey isn't the best tool to use for a corridor or a 106 or a linear type project. And I won't go into details why this is, but it works pretty well for non-corridor projects, which is what we're looking at here versus Form 1006. Anyway, if you use the web saw survey, this is easily completed. You know the information was on that map and was in the table you looked at. So this is quite simple to fill out. If it's not, then you need to call up the NRCS and see how the other agency, the federal agency, is doing it, and our people want to work together on how to get this completed. Okay, Part 4. Okay, Part 4 has to do with soils information, and it is completed by someone within NRCS. And in this case, it says total acres of prime and unique farmland. Well, what we did for this example is we just took that 100 acres in Part 3 and said 50 acres was prime and unique. And then B says total acres statewide and local importance. We said 50 acres. And the map that we'll look at in a few minutes or in a short time will substantiate this. Okay. Now, I usually will do Part 5 next. And Part 5 is the acres determined and the relative value of the LE being used to determine what this value is. And what you do is you take the soils, you multiply them time, the LE or the relative value. You get a weighted, you get totals, and then you divide the total acres into the sum of all the products that you multiplied, and the quotient will be the answer to Part 5, which is the relative value of the site to be converted. Okay. Then you can go back up and probably do at least Part C and D. The next question is percentage of farmland in government jurisdiction with same or higher relative value. That is where that you're going to have to use either Worksheet 2 or you're going to have to come up with some other method to make that determination. But the example you're going to see the worksheets in a few minutes is the fact that due to the fact that Part 5 was 85, it says same or higher relative value. You're going to find out from that worksheet in a few minutes. That's 15%. Then C says percent of farmland in county or jurisdiction to be converted. And that's just a division, and we'll talk about that just a little bit later as we go through the worksheets and the examples of how we answer these questions. So basically, when the NRCS has done these parts, 2, 4, and 5, we return it to the federal agency who sent it to us, and they will complete then Part 6. And again, there's a separate module on how Part 6 is done, so we will not discuss it at this time. Now, so the minute you finish this, you want to go up and you want to put that date in Part 2, which in this case is May 11th, 2011, and you want to be sure it goes out of the office that day so they get it back within the allowed time that they need to have it so that agency can use it. Okay, let's go through those worksheets now, and we'll kind of look at this, and we'll kind of give an overview of how this will be calculated. Here's this hypothetical map I was telling you about. That's 100 acres, 50 acres of prime farmland, and then 50 acres of statewide. And again, if you use the web saw survey, you have all the numbers you need from that web saw survey I demonstrated just a few minutes ago. Okay, let's go to the first worksheet. Now, if you go look at the module for LE development. You'll see a worksheet like that in here. And if you go a little higher, okay, now this is showing farmable land. So let's go a little higher up so we can see the bottom of this worksheet. A little more. Okay, good enough. Okay. So remember I told you farmable land was anything that had a potential or productivity. In this case, it goes ag group 1 through 8. So it's pretty simple. All you do is just add the acres up. You remember we had 300,000 acres. It's a 500,000 acre county. And so 60% is your answer. So that's how you answer that question about farmable land in that jurisdiction, by using this worksheet or a system that you develop for your jurisdiction. Okay, let's go to the next worksheet. Or the same worksheet, just different use for it. Okay, remember we had to come up with a farmland, and farmland is defined as prime, statewide, unique, or local. And you notice here that groups 1 through 6 qualify as being prime and statewide. So again, using worksheet 2, all you have to do is look at the acres and add them up, and you see it's 200,000 divided by 500,000, which is 40%. So this is the reason I stress that you have some type of worksheet or some type of system if you're going to fill this out, because this should never change. I get a little scary when I'm talking to somebody and they say, oh, it varies from my form to form. I can't figure out how, because you don't change the soil survey, and you don't change the soils, and they don't change designations. So these two are pretty important documents if you're going to do many 1006s or 106s, because I have to have something explained to me why they won't be the same on every one until there's an update to the soil survey or until something else happens that's very drastic to that soil survey. Okay, this shows the calculation, just a little higher up. This shows the calculation I was telling you about to get that weighted average. All you do is you take the soils. In this case, the soils that we had was in group 1, 3, and 6. And you notice that the acres was 50, 40, and 10. And you notice the relative value was 180 and 10. You multiply those across, you get 5,000, 3,200, 300. You add those together, 8,500. Divide by 100. And you come up with a value of 85, and that's what goes back on the worksheet. Okay, next slide. Keep going. Okay, you remember that one question under Part 4, they want to know the farmland relative value higher or higher than proposed site? Well, you remember we calculated 85 in the preceding slide. So if you have worksheet 2 or something similar to worksheet 2, all you do to go to the right column, you start the bottom up. The minute you get to 85 or higher, in this case it's 86, all you do is take the 7 and 8%, and the answer is 15. And this is the way this is done. And this is why these 3 worksheets or similar worksheets that have the same information are valuable, because this is what you use to do part of parts 4 and 5. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is another blank copy of the 1006 of the non-quarter on the site, 4 sites. And all I want to do is just point out to you, if you go to the very bottom of this all the way down, I have some things highlighted here. The reason I do this is because if you notice that on both the 1006 and 106, we have 100 points for the LE, which is parts 2, 4, and 5, and then part 6 is 160. And if you're going to make comparisons between tracts or between different jurisdictions, you need to have a common denominator. That is, you've got to have the same scale if you're going to compare numbers. So all this tells you that if you end up with something that's a little bit different than what this comes out to be, this is how you ratio it. And by this, let's assume that the jurisdiction, instead of having 260 or whatever it is, or 160, they have 200. They come up with a rate of 180. So all you do is divide the 200 into what they actually get for their numerical value, and then multiply that quotient by 160, and that tells you the points for Site A. Okay, what I have done here is, this is the 1006, and what I've done here is I've put numbers in all of these blocks, or what we want to call them, that you need to fill out if you're an NRCS employee complying with the request to complete parts 2, 4, and 5. So if you go to the next slide, these numbers will correspond with what's on the next slide. So if you're in the block 1 on the 1006, all you do is come over here, and this corresponds with 1 here, and it tells you what to do. Now, let's go down to the one that I said I'd talk a little more about, and go down, keep going down. Keep going till you get to Part 5. Okay, Part 5. Part 5 shows you, or gives you a verbal on how to calculate Part 5, but on that line that talks about the comparison of this, then which would be line 14, it says percent of farmland in county or local government to be converted. Okay, let's read this together, and that gives people the most problem, or I get the most calls about how to calculate that particular item. It says, list the percentage of farmland in the county or unit or local government to be converted. The number of acres shown as farmland as defined in FPPA in Part 2 should be divided into the total acres to be converted, both directly and indirectly, where the amount being converted is very small compared to the total amount of farmland area. You should never show less than 0.001. You may end up at 0.00001 or some number. Round that back up to 0.001. So we don't want to carry it out to any smaller number than what you see suggested. I think this sheet here probably will answer most of your questions. If not, you can contact one of our offices, either your office in your jurisdiction or our state office. Now, if we go back to the top of the page, there's one thing I forgot to mention, all the way to the top of the page. Keep going. Keep going. Okay. You're going to say, well, why is draft up there? Well, because the reason I put draft up there is because if you use this, you may have to modify this depending on the local jurisdiction. I'm not sure how their worksheet is going to look. And so this is made for the worksheet and for the information that we presented, because I'm not sure that this would always be the same. But as long as you have a similar product that you saw as far as the worksheets go, then these definitions will work. But if you come up with some other type of tables or something, then you might be sure that these are appropriate definitions. If not, you may have to modify them. Okay, next slide. Okay, if you look at the upper right corner, you're going to see it says NRCS CPA 106. And you're going to see that if you look at parts 2, 4, and 5, and this is the quarter form, or this is what you use for a quarter project, you're going to notice that those are identical. They're no different than the 1006. And therefore, you use the same procedure to complete the 106 and the 1006. So I guess the question is going to be, well, if those are identical, then why do we have two forms. And if we go on down to Part 6, the difference is that a corridor has only 10 items under Part 6, and a non-corridor has 12 items. If you want to know about the difference and why they're different, I would suggest you go to the module on completing the essay for a 1006 and a 106. But that's the only difference. So what we do for the LE portion is identical. So if you have the information for the 1006, you can do the 106 because it's asked for the same information in both forms. Now, if you go to the bottom, we'll show you some of the questions. We're not going to go over these, but at least you get some appreciation of what essay requires or the questions they ask. This is a good time for me to point out, too, but we strongly encourage that the jurisdictions, if they wish to develop their own LISA system, we encourage that to happen because you're using this system, which was developed to be used nationally, and I would think that a jurisdiction would like to modify some of this. You still have to meet certain criteria, but you give them flexibility so that it better fits maybe what you like to see happen within your jurisdiction. Okay, just to demonstrate what I told you, this, I highlight up that corner, it says Form NRCS CPA 106. It's identical to what you saw where the number says 1006. So I want to just verify to you that if you like to have two separate sets of criteria with the correct number on them, you can use this. But you can use the 1006 is going to ask the same questions and have the same words. Okay, let me comment just a minute. As you know that we federal employees, we have to follow the guidelines that's in the law and other rules and regulations. And so we have the law for FPPA. We also have the rules and regulations, and they could be at the national level, or they could be at a departmental level at the national level. So it makes a difference. But anyway, this particular document is called the Code of Federal Regulations. It's Title 7, Volume 6. If you want to cite it, it's 7 CFR 658.4. And Section 658.4 is Guidelines for Criteria. Now, I'm not going to go through this, but there's a few things that I want to emphasize to you and also to anyone who's doing this. The first one is number 1. Do you remember I told you about those dates? They're very significant. And because if you look with that number 1, that's inside the red circle with the red standing out at us, it says the NRCS will respond to this request within 10 working days of their receipt, except that in cases where a site visit or land evaluation system design is needed, NRCS will respond in 30 days. In the event that NRCS fails to complete its response within the required period, if further delay would interfere with the construction activities of the agency should proceed as though the site was not farmed land, which means that it can be all prime farmland, and if you don't get that back within 10 days, you can read the last sentence again. Go ahead. Okay, next one is what I'm encouraging you to do is the fact that a federal agency may assign a site assessment criteria. And I'm only doing this here because I think you should go over, if you're the federal agency, and be sure that you read the module on how to complete these forms for SA. Go ahead. Okay, again, this is item 3 on this, and that's this particular CFR. I just want to point out to you that that we really encourage the jurisdictions to develop their own LISA system. I think that they will be very proud of it, and also they will have then a document that is written for their particular situation in their county. Okay, item 4. We encourage this to happen We encourage that the agency who completes the form, which is the other agency, not us, we do complete some, but not too many in our agency. But we wish that you return to us the final copy after you've completed 6 and also complete the rest of the form. The reason we want this is because we are required by rules and the law that we send this accumulation of information that's gathered from these 1006s and 106s to Congress so they can see what's happened to this farmland that is very important for us to be able to produce enough food and fiber to supply our needs. So this cannot be emphasized strong enough that for us to give a reliable, accurate report to Congress, we need these back after you have completed the form, or at least made a decision. And even if you don't complete them, tell us why you didn't and send it back, because we still need to report certain parts of that, even though the final report is not maybe complete. I've enjoyed my presentation. As you can probably grasp that I'm very enthusiastic about this. Soils is one of our important resources in this country. It feeds us, it gives us fiber, and it's just one thing that we just going to have and have a sufficient amount to be sure to supply food for us. I'd like to close by saying that if you have any questions, please contact your local NRCS office or our state office, and they will be able to help you. And again, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.